Hey, everybody. Welcome to the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Hey, what we do on this podcast is talk about what B2B sales and marketing leaders, operators, and experts are doing today to really break through and grow their businesses at exponential levels. Let's get it in the interview. At the end, I'll give you an update on my courses, and you can check out my website at b2brevenue.com, and it's Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn. Hey, Dan, welcome to the show. As way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Ryan, great to be with you. Thank you very much. Well, I live in Northern Virginia. Been married for over 26 years now. Got 4 kids. They're all college age. Well, actually, my eldest just graduated. And then he's got 3 sisters that are still in school. Twins, one in Boston, one in New York. And then my youngest just got accepted to the University of Miami in Florida. So we'll be paying the bills forever. I'll be selling forever, Brian.
That's it. Nothing like motivation. I've always known that the family guys always seem to do really well.
There is no choice, but it's good when you love what you do anyway. So
yeah. And how'd you get interested in sales?
That's a great question. I have my uncle I'm very close to actually and spoke to yesterday for some inspiration through this crisis, is a true entrepreneur, now retired, but ran a very successful set of copier dealerships many years ago in the early 80s. And he was my inspiration. And lo and behold, I started my sales career selling copiers. So he was my inspiration. I knew that from a personality standpoint, it was always very appealing to me, but he's also someone that I looked up to. And if he could be successful, certainly I wanted to follow in his footsteps. So that was my inspiration.
Cool. And what did you like about it? I mean, selling copiers is pretty hard.
Well, I don't like to tell people that it took years off my life. I started a company called Linear Worldwide, which back actually when I started was Harris 3M, and worked there for a boss that I will never forget. Hopefully we'll see this or listen to this podcast or see the webcast. But what at that point in time, just coming out of school, and to this day, I enjoy winning, doing right, ethically and morally and legally correct. But I love the notion of success. And I've actually written in one of my articles, my purpose was not letting my family down and quite frankly, not letting him down. Every month when we finished out the month and we would have closeout Saturday. So the month would end and the first Saturday after the month's end, we'd all get together and we'd all be filling out our reports and how our ratios were, call to demo and demo to close and all that. And if you had a good month, which I always strive to do, it was nice to be part of that club. It was not nice to be part of the club that did not have a good month. So I was always challenging myself. I'm a competitor at heart and I like to win. And when you do it the right way, as the vast majority of salespeople do, it's a rush. And coming right out of school, it's good that I cut my teeth that way. And being able to make that connection with a client over what could be considered to be a very boring piece of office equipment, I quickly found out that that's not what it was about it at all. People really do. That was my first introduction to that cliche that people are buying you. And that's certainly what when you could follow that up and if they ever bought again, if you were there long enough at the company for them to buy again, and that was the biggest compliment that demonstrated the fact that you had initiated and retained a relationship.
And where did that competitive streak come from?
I don't know. I've asked myself that. I have 2 lovely parents. Yeah. And one worked for the Secret Service and one was a homemaker and then worked inside an office. And so they had not come from sales. I really don't know, but it definitely, the switch was flipped in me. I think at an early age, whether it was running for student government in high school or having a variety of jobs in college and, becoming vice president of my fraternity. It's an interesting question, but I think it's just in my blood, and to this day it is as well.
It's interesting that the political side of it, I haven't heard that before, but it makes sense, right? Because that's hyper competitive, right?
Very, very competitive. And, I think my biggest competitor, back to your question, is me,
Yeah.
myself. And, I always, in my first job that I explained to you, or that I was talking about at Lanier, my old boss, it was instilled in us the definition of purpose. Purpose was someone or something that if you had to face and defeat, it would be more painful and punishing than what we do on a day-to-day basis to be successful in sales. And I never forgot that. So now it's my family. Now it's, the ability to look back and know that I've succeeded in relationships. So I always had that purpose. And maybe to answer your question, that was what I came to realize that's what kicks me in the butt every day and gets me out of bed.
Yeah. I mean, the purpose, something higher and bigger than yourself.
That's right. That's right.
And for you, it's your family.
Definitely family, but from an obligation standpoint and paying the bills, but also obviously they're near and dear to me, and I want them to continue to have a good life. I'm very blessed.
Yeah. How about as far as birth order? Were you a only child, or were you in the middle first?
No, just me and my brother. He is 2 years younger than I, so a very, very small family. And it was just we two growing up, and a set of very, very good friends who with still close to this day.
And it sounds like you had a routine where you were keeping track of demo to close.
Oh yeah, at Lanier, we absolutely did. And see, I'm so, I wouldn't call it gullible, but I was blissfully ignorant, and so that's where I really learned the discipline of sales. That you could be robotic, which would not help you, but I knew that I needed to turn more doors, and I've written about this, than anybody in my office. I needed to turn more doors. And when they told me that if you'll just make 20 cold calls every day, that's in person, knocking on doors, 2 presentations, and if you'll do that, that means every 10 calls you'll have a presentation. If your demo to close is 4 to 1, that means that that every week you ought to be making 2 sales. And so to go back to that question, that's where I learned that discipline. I never considered myself to have that finesse of a great salesperson. What I would do and will always do is turn more doors than even from the cliche standpoint. I used to say they got to sleep sometime. And if I needed to stay late in my territory in Old Town Alexandria, that's what I did, just to hit my numbers in that regard. And then the sales numbers would come through naturally.
Yeah. Well, at least it was a nice condensed territory.
Yeah. If you're familiar with Old Town, there's cobblestone streets. I went up and down them with hospital carts with copiers on them. That is not an exaggeration. I had to buy a van and had to put the copiers in the back on top of hospital carts.
Wow. And so after that, what did you move into? Was it more complex sales?
Well, I was in management at Lanier, and then I totally switched gears to where I spent the majority of my career, and that is in trade shows and events. So I remember a recruiter called up and said, we've got this opportunity for a national account manager where you'd be working with companies for exhibit space in trade shows. And I said, you mean booths? But I'm not in. Well, I quickly found out that the trade show industry represents billions and billions of dollars. But anything that if you look around your office right now, or anybody listening or watching looks around at anything that they see has been demonstrated at a trade show. It's basically a microcosm of our economy. So I did switch gears, and I went to work for a wonderful company in Old Town called National Trade Productions, and they produced events that catered to government spending. Yeah. And so I'd work with a variety of IT companies that were selling directly to the government, and really got the fever there. And I was able to take the sales skills that I'd acquired at Lanier and applied them there. The fundamentals of sales are the same. So it was involving people with exhibiting and sponsoring and participating in trade shows. And from there, I went to the Consumer Electronics Show where I spent the vast majority of my career, the big event that takes place in Vegas. Our office was in Arlington, continues to be in Arlington, Virginia, and I had the time of my life there, both as a director and vice president of sales and business development there. So,
and that sale is quite a bit different because you're dealing with people in marketing, and there's a long. They've got their events. It's usually planned out. Their budgets are pretty fixed. Hard to move around.
You're dealing with a variety of personas in that particular. You're absolutely right. So whether it's the trade show manager, and that title does not give these people enough credit. They are doing it all, and oftentimes whether it's a 10 by 10 or an 80 by 80 exhibit space configuration, these people are living, breathing trade shows 100% of the time. So they are definitely part of the decision-making process. And then, like you say, you have a VP of marketing, sales, a CMO, oftentimes the CEO. Some of these larger companies, they're spending millions and millions of dollars. Other smaller ones are betting it all on January and putting it all on the line there. So you have to be very, very sensitive to that. So it's an interesting sales process, and one that cannot be taken for granted. It's just a different dynamic than selling a copier. Or selling, or working in e-commerce, which I did at a startup as well.
And what was the key approach there? Was it building those relationships long in advance? Because it's probably not an impulse buy.
For a smaller company, it's not an impulse buy. I have to say that when I got to CES, there were some legacy companies that continue to be involved in the show today. Panasonic being one of them. Samsung. When I got there in the mid 90s, Samsung and LG and Daewoo, they did not occupy a lot of space. Now, Samsung and LG are and Sony are, of course, are some of the major stalwarts, along with others in CES. So they had been there, but you had to grow those accounts on a year-to-year basis. Back to your question, we needed to grow different product categories. And for some entrepreneurs, that, CES was a whole new consideration. Satellite radio, for instance, was a pavilion at CES in the past. It wasn't even a product category. So you had someone like XM Radio, if you recall, or Sirius starting off in very, very small very small place. And then all of a sudden that blossomed. So you really had to be able to convey the features and, more importantly, the benefits of participating in a trade show. Many CMOs or VPs of marketing, as you stated, they're at that point in time, they're spending money on the web, or they're spending money not regular advertising and not participating in trade shows. When people buy an exhibit space, or referred to as a booth, that's a fraction of what they end up spending. They got to fly people out. They've got to entertain. They got to put people up. All those expenses. So even when you're talking to someone about a 10 by 10 space, the smallest space available, their cost outside of the booth they could spend $100,000 just to participate. So, like I said, they're putting it all on the line, and you do need to develop that relationship and a degree of trust and show your expertise. Else they're going to have a horrible show and they're not going to talk to you again. And I would tell people that. I'm like, if you're not willing to work with me and prepare, believe me, I'd love to work with you. And I'm grateful for your business, but you will hate me if you're not taking the steps to have a successful show, because it'll be a waste of your time. Conversely, if they do, there's nothing more gratifying to have someone come to Space Selection for the following year and choose a space again enthusiastically.
Well, yeah, because it does have that opportunity where you have the salespeople, you have a lot of decision makers in the one place that may not have met yet.
Another mentor of mine who runs the Consumer Technology Association, Gary Shapiro, says there is even today, through what we're going through, which is somewhat of a big question mark, nothing will ever replace the 5 sensory experience and the serendipity. And that's my favorite word that Gary says. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, we've had people at CS, and that continues to be. When you have Mark Cuban walking down an aisle of startups, we started something many years ago that's called Eureka Park, still exists. And when you have VCs or entrepreneurs like Mark that are walking the aisle and making investments in these. You just never know what's going to happen. And we might not be shaking hands anymore or hugging anymore, but we are human. We are human beings that are going to continue to need to interact. And that's where trade shows, again, people don't realize the billions of dollars, that are represented at trade show events. And I don't think they're going to disappear. They certainly might become more hybrid, like what we're doing now from a virtual standpoint. But some aspect of trade shows will remain in companies. I was just speaking to a senior executive of a technology company yesterday, and they're going to continue to invest in making sure that their clients and prospects can meet with them on a face-to-face basis. Just a different world, though.
Yeah. And what are you doing today?
In terms of career? Well, I have
not exactly today.
Well, I took a break to speak with you, was certainly well worth it. I have a very cool job. I work at the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. Many people have heard of it and visited at our old location. About a year ago, we just opened up at a brand new location right off the National Mall in this beautiful, gorgeous building that unfortunately right now is closed. And we're following the guidelines and the directives of Mayor Bowser in D.C. But my team actually works with the event space at the museum. Some museums offer their museum itself and other parts of the museum. They offer their event space for various clients to hold a particular function. We have this gorgeous event space up at the top of the museum that is almost like you're looking at an HD picture when you see this vista of DC in front of you, and the space is incredibly popular. Unfortunately, right now it's not available, so people have had to reschedule their events during this time. But long story short, my team actually sells the space on the 7th and 8th floor. Those are the two top floors of the museum, and this is breathtaking space. So whether it's a wedding or huge corporate 1,000-person event that rents out the entire museum, it's very, very popular for corporate and nonprofit and for social events.
And what's that like? Is it mostly inbound, or is there still a lot of outbound selling?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd be remiss if I'd be lying if I said that we didn't have any incoming interest. Of course we do. It's a very, very
beautiful
hot
location.
space. But we do work with we do work outbound from a sales perspective, and we also work with our partners, whether they be a caterer, photographer, a florist, an AV company, for referrals. We're very, very fortunate. It's not order taking, and I don't want to say that it sells itself, but a tailwind of a beautiful space is definitely on our side, and I'm very, very proud of that. The salespeople we have, though, are extraordinarily talented, and this is all relationships. I'm very, very pleased to say that they all have strong relationships. And I failed to say one other area of responsibility I have is for our group tours. So these are people that are, especially student groups that are coming from all over the country, and also tourists that are coming from all over the world. We have an expert on staff, and she's her sales responsibility is to work with the tour operators and the various companies that might offer vouchers or the opportunities to visit the museum. So she handles the tour and travel industry, and with great success as well.
Now, I got to imagine you're probably at the high end of the market, given the location and the
well, let's just say that we emphasize selling value. We're not the least expensive in town, and we shouldn't be. We certainly deliver value, and our clients tell us that again and again and again. We are not the lowest investment for space. We deliver a great product, and I believe just as much as that beautiful space, we have our service is impeccable, and I give the credit not only to our salespeople, but to our staff, at every milestone or every touchstone that touches the client. I know for a fact that our clients tell us that our belief in customer service top down is exceptional, and I think that's where people get their return on investment.
And I got to believe that after that first visit, you can get a sense of if it clicks or not.
You can. That's palpable. That's palpable. Sometimes, well, a lot of times it's not a done deal.
Right.
But certainly there is nothing like, and it's been challenging now because we're not able to show people the space. We can do so virtually. Yeah. But, that's sales 101 when you're able to get in front of someone, not only with that space or your product, but you can connect from a body language standpoint. But it does not hurt that when you take them out, and the minute we start on the 8th floor with this beautiful outdoor space that we have, as well as a glass enclosed canopy, terrace, and the minute you walk out there, I mean, it doesn't get old to me. It's breathtaking. Yeah. And then so you can tell that's a wonderful way to start off. And when people are, you're talking and people continue to be looking around, that's a great distraction. If they're distracted by the view, I'll shut up, or the salespeople will keep quiet and let the space speak for itself. But they are experts, though. When you couple that with the beauty of the space, it's a great package.
That's it. When you think of the elements of a location and you have a view, because that can't be bought.
It can't be. Now, there are great venues in Washington, and
a lot. Yeah,
and we're not sold out every day, but there are lots of great venues that don't incorporate a view, but their service is great, and there's a novelty about a particular, and there's less expensive options, but the view is really, coupled with our service is really what our value proposition, amongst other things, it contributes to that value proposition.
And I would imagine that tour, if their eyes light up, then you kind of have them, because there's only a few places in DC that got great views.
Right. Well, you never talk past the sale, as many of us know in sales. So that is an advantage. You are building that relationship. If you want to call it selling, an environment where you are immersed within the product that you're selling. You are standing, and many people, obviously, in the hospitality industry know that there's nothing like what, even, if it's a ballroom, there are magnificent hotels around the city that have great event space, and they're very, very successful. So there's nothing like being able to be immersed within within the product that you're selling, to be able to have that atmosphere.
And I'm sure it probably attracts the people that want a more modern venue, because a lot of the DC places are more traditional.
Modern in terms of
build out.
And efficiency. For instance, we have a catering kitchen. We don't offer our own catering. We have caterers that we work with in the area that are on our preferred catering list, but they help build that kitchen. We did it through a focus group. So they're very, very familiar with the venue. So that's more state of the art, and what we offer, whether it's the ability, we provide the shell, which is gorgeous enough, but people are invited to do whatever they want within our guidelines. So they work with their different vendors, florists, as I mentioned before, AV companies, caterers. So yeah, that's where the advantage is in terms of it's not a rustic look. It is a more modern look. And again, we have venues, as you know, around the city that are beautiful, that are there, they go back 50, 100 years and even old, and they're just gorgeous.
Yeah.
But in terms of being state of the art, we're up there, and I know that's attractive to our clients.
Now, on the corporate side, I got to imagine if you don't have that economic decision maker there for that tour, that person, even if they're delighted, it meets all the requirements, they love everything, they got to go back and still sell someone else.
That's a fine line. If you're not able to have what I call the man, the person with the money, the authority, and the need, then it's a challenge. You can be as excited as you want, and they can be as excited, but I've just done this long enough to know, and some of this is commonsensical, as you point out, you are relying on them. If you've done everything you can without, undermining the person that you're dealing with to get to the decision maker, and you can't, you're relying on them to be your advocate. And the danger is then you're talking price and you're not necessarily talking value. And we stand our ground. I mean, we have a great product, We don't walk away saying, well, too bad, it's bad to be you. But sorry, we take nothing for granted, but you have an advocate. And that really comes down to asking the right questions. How is the decision made? Who beside yourself is involved in this decision? That way you're not insulting anyone when you know in your heart of hearts that it might not be they're not the final decision maker. How does the process work? Can we get this person over and you want to talk, the more questions you can ask, again, sales 101, to understand the context of what you're dealing with. And I have no problem in counseling salespeople to say, listen, if it's going to come down to price after all that we've discussed, I can just get that objection out of the way. We're not going to be the
cheapest, right?
Right. And that is by design, Madam Prospect or Mr. Prospect, not that because we want to charge you more. We just know what our venue can deliver. And so that engenders respect. We're not going to win them all, but I'd rather be totally transparent. And that's part of, that's integrity. That's part of the relationship. And oftentimes people will invest in spite of themselves because of that, because they appreciate that candor.
And I got to imagine one of the hardest parts is you got a expiring resource, meaning that Saturday doesn't come again for another 7 days. So
but we sell during the week. There are our most
I mean, like an airplane seat. Once the airplane takes off, you can't sell
that's right. No, that's right. You do have an expiring resource in that regard. That's correct. That's correct.
How do you manage to that? Is it that one of the hardest parts, or?
Well, inventory is a puzzle, and sometimes, unfortunately, the space will sit empty. Not often. So it's a matter of balancing our outbound and inbound. And sometimes, we're just not able to, as is every venue, be able to maximize, or a hotel with the rooms, be able to maximize our inventory or our capacity. So you do the best, not everyone or few are going to buy the entire museum, meaning they're going to, or rent the entire museum, meaning they'll have our event space and they'll have our exhibit space and they'll have our lobby. So oftentimes we're doing 2 events at one time, which means that the clients, both of them, if they're 2 or even 3 events, they need to use the same caterer, the same vendor. So there, from a relationship standpoint, you're building a high degree of trust. So that's one way that we maximize our capacity and our inventory. What we won't do is put ourselves in a situation where we have to sacrifice customer service, because that might not be that might not be apparent to the potential client, the sausage making, but we'll know that, and we don't want to do anything. People are putting their trust in us. We want them coming away with the best experience possible.
And how would you characterize the difference between the best salespeople that you've met in your career versus the average?
Average, while it is, we hear this cliche that while it is a numbers game to a degree, when it's only a numbers game, that's telemarketing and that's smiling and dialing and that's knocking on doors.
Labor.
It's just, exactly, that's just labor. When I think the best salespeople truly have it within them that they have a service mentality. This is a noble profession. Sometimes it gets a really bad rap. There's a book called The Go-Giver by Bob Berg, who I really, really identify with, and that is the notion of serving others first, whether it's your team or your clients. Those are the most exceptional salespeople. I don't think integrity ever backfires on anyone. And when, it might not be apparent in the short term, even if you have to lose a couple deals, it might not be apparent, but in the long run, that attitude of gratitude and that attitude of service, certainly to me, sets apart the excellent, great salespeople from the average ones.
Yeah, because it focuses the rep on the other person.
Right. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And it is not about you. That's what I teach in sales training myself. It's about them. You can be as excited as you want about your product solution. Doesn't mean a hill of beans to the other person unless you frame that, your particular solution or product, in the context of their world and the challenges and problems that they're facing on a day-to-day basis. If not, totally irrelevant. You're wasting their time. You're wasting your time.
And do you interview for that? Is that one of the key things that you're looking for when you're hiring?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Again, is it is it going to be smiling, dying, or these are people? And typically these are people coming to us with, the salespeople, the three superstars that are on my staff right now are experts in relationships, and all three of their reputations in the industry are stellar. So the folks that we talk to, and we're always on the lookout for great staff, that's what's made them successful. They're great salespeople. They work hard, but they also have that particular attitude, and that is what informs their success. No doubt about it. I listen to them on the phone, and I participate in meetings with them, and I let them take it away. I mean, I love being part of the process and the relationship building or the relationship retention. But we certainly do look for those types of people. Forget it if not. This is a touch business, even though in these days of non-touching.
I got to imagine, because, especially when they're the event is them, it might be their money. It's a lot of money.
Well, I will tell you, it's their reputation. This is what I learned in the trade show industry. That literally, in particular, the folks that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, those trade show managers or trade show executives, their reputation and oftentimes their job is on the line. And I know that when they come to choose their space. So at CES, as soon as the show starts, we run a process where folks can start choosing their space for the following year, space draw, if you will. And people come in there and we identify, and I say we because they still do this. There has to be a high degree of empathy. They're putting it on the line. Oftentimes they're on the phone with an executive saying, okay, this space is available, this space, which one do you, and they're making a decision a year in advance, and they are putting it on the line. It is them. And you have to empathize with that. You can't, let them walk away 10 minutes later feeling like they made this huge risk and are going back to that booth space anxious. Our job is to really help them in any sales position make the best informed decision. And if the decision is not in their best interest, to walk away from that sale, again, that will never, Madam Prospect, don't choose this prospect. Our event space at the Spine Museum is probably not in your best interest in this particular situation. And we've referred business to other venues as they've done for us. That's the right thing. It's never the wrong thing to do the right thing. Yeah. So, or it's never wrong to do the right thing. And that's really a philosophy that I'm very adamant about.
Cool. Hey, Dan, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect with you and learn more about your work?
Sure. Well, my email address at the Spy Museum is dcole, at spymuseum.org. We are nonprofit, so hence the ORG.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Hey, I want to make sure you're checking out b2brevenue.com. That is where you can get a free copy of an ebook that I did. It's a real ebook. It's not a fluff book. It shows and talks about how companies make buying decisions and how you can influence that from both a marketing and a sales standpoint, how to find all the people that are in the decision path and what they need to see, know, and touch and feel before they make a product selection. If your team needs some coaching, some help, some training, some systems, some processes that do work today, because we know what doesn't work, or what doesn't work, I'll show you what does work and how to connect and get into pretty much any account. It includes deal coaching and content community, and I can customize it for your particular company. Just go to b2brevenue.com, look under training, schedule a call with me. We can talk it over, or just sign up. You can pay per month or all at once, whichever makes most sense for your budget. Also, I put out videos pretty much daily on LinkedIn and on YouTube. On LinkedIn, it's Brian G. Burns, and on YouTube, it's Brian Burns Sales. Just search for that. If you like to consume some video content. And if you see me on LinkedIn, please put a comment and a share and a like on some of the videos. I really appreciate it. I've got a company page for each podcast. This one, the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast, where I put both content and humor videos out daily. And tell a friend about the podcast. Really appreciate you listening. Check out the show notes for all the partners and the connections you can make there, the coupon codes for the products to evaluate them, see if they're a right match for you. And we'll see you next time.